Greetings everyone and welcome to Conducting Effective Management Reviews webinar. Happy to have you all here with us. I am R. Telemani, the PCB organizer of this webinar, and the guest for today is Sheryl Anderson, Managing Director for Quality System Solutions and Initiatives and Certified Trainer for HACCP ISO 9001 and ISO 22000. Please feel free to write your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, or you can use the raise hand function. We will unmute you and you will have a chance to ask the question directly to Sheryl. Sheryl will answer to all questions accordingly at the end of the presentation. Please, Sheryl, you may start the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Arta. Good morning, everyone. And I am glad to be sharing in another webinar, and we'll be focusing on conducting effective management reviews. I think you would have known that there has been a revision of the standard, which is ISO 9001 standard. So I'm going to focus on those requirements. Those requirements, I think, would be applicable to most of the other standards that are there and are being implemented in your organization. Now, as Arthur said, with QSSI, and I'm focused primarily on ISO 9001, 22000, and HACCP. And you can, that's my contact information, and I'll show you this slide at the end again, so in case you want to ask follow-up questions to answer to your queries. The topics that we're going to discuss this morning are looking at the inputs and the outputs of a typical management review. I'm going to extract only a few inputs. Maybe I won't look at all of them today because of the limited amount of time, but I'm going to be focusing on some key areas that I think I just need to clarify. Management review as a tool for evaluation. We're going to look at management review and the bottom line. Also, management's demonstration of leadership by owning the management review process. And we'll discuss some misconceptions about management reviews. Now, with a management review, I want persons to understand that it's not an event. It is a system of assessing the performance of the organization. It is actually one element of performance review. And if we're going to be guided by PDCA, which is Plan, Do, Check, Act, we're going to apply that to the management review system. For the planning aspect of a management review, we look at, scheduling the management review, how many times per year you'll be having this management review or this review process. For instance, developing the agenda for the review, preparing the summary reports, the inputs for the review, that's the planning part, and making sure that the status updates are available for the actual execution of a review. The do part is the execution of the review, and most times it's in the form of a meeting, and we'll discuss that later on. And check-in is monitoring the implementation of the improvements from that review, and we'll take corrective measures if necessary and act on making sure that we're always improving. So that is the PDCA applied to the management review process. So let us dissect the different inputs to the management review. Now, normally there are several inputs outlined under management review when we look at the requirements of the standard. And one of the first things that we look at, and I guess the first things that will be discussed, is the actions from the previous reviews. Now, what is normally discussed is closeout of outstanding actions, and I want persons to understand that this usually takes a form of a status on the implementation of those outstanding actions. This part is not about discussing the actions within the meeting. For a more effective management review, you want to make sure that you have a status update on each action before you actually come to the management review. Because what we find with this aspect, people usually waste a lot of time discussing those outstanding actions, and by the time we are finished discussing these outstanding actions, we have limited time to discuss the other inputs to the review. So I think it is cognizant for persons to to take this into consideration to make sure that the status updates are provided as inputs or previously to the actual meeting. Now for customer perception now, in terms of discussing that input, we look at the status of customer complaints, for instance, trends, queries, and what is important, irrespective of the type of methodology that you may use to determine what customers think about your service or your product, it is very important that you study trends based on feedback that you would have assessed, the queries that you would have assessed, whether it's through a focus group or through customer surveys. The reason why you want to look at these trends is for breakthroughs or improvements or innovations to your product or to your service. So trends, whether it is incremental improvements or whether it's breakthrough improvements, it is always important that you assess the trends within the review in order to begin the process of, for instance, research and development into your improved product or making sure that you're satisfying your customers. Because sometimes our customers tell us certain things about our product and we don't study those trends enough in order to redesign our product in order to become or to remain sustainable in the market. When BlackBerry first came on the market, people did not know that, or companies did not know, or you did not know that you will be stuck to a smartphone or a smartphone will be stuck to you. But because BlackBerry was able, or whichever company was able to diagnose and to determine or to study those trends, they were able to design products such as a smartphone in order to remain sustainable in the market. And we know that Apple and Samsung took over this product. Now, one thing I should caution though, whenever you're doing your customer feedback, it's always important to look at the determinants or the determinants of your product quality. For instance, when you give out a survey, just don't say what is your overall satisfaction level with our product, and then you say from 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, you choose, and then somebody may choose, okay, 7 out of 10. What does 7 out of 10 mean to the company? What is important is that you separate what are the different determinants of your product. For instance, if I'm driving a car, ask about the mileage, ask about the aesthetics, ask about the technology that is being used, ask about the after-sales service, ask about the performance of the vehicle, instead of saying what is your overall satisfaction level. When you do that, you'll be able to make incremental improvements in different aspects of your product, instead of having a false sense of satisfaction, saying, okay, all my customers gave me 8 out of 10, so I'm fine, I don't have to make any sort of improvements to my product. So that is one element I would like you to pay attention to. Now, with the new standard, there's more of a focus on risk assessment. So one of the inputs is looking at how the company has been able to treat the risks that have been identified. Now, this is an input to the management review. You would have done some assessment of these risks before the management meeting, and you would have been able to determine how well you're managing the risk. Let us look at objectives as one input into the management review. You're determining whether or not you are meeting those objectives, and if you're not meeting those objectives, why you're not meeting those objectives. For instance, if I say that I want to reduce my expenditure by 20%, I need to determine whether or not I'm on track, yes or no. But this type of objective is very generic. I want you to focus on the elements of the expenditure that you want to reduce. For instance, I want to reduce my internal failures or my external failures by 20%, which is in turn going to reduce the expenditure by by a certain percentage. So it's not just about looking at the financial statement and say, okay, the expenditure has been reduced. What elements of your financial statement, what elements of your expenditure do you want to reduce? Do you want to reduce waste? Do you want to reduce the number of returns, the number of rework in the process? So it is, when we set objectives, we have to be very clear about these objectives, and if we're clear about these objectives, we will know, we will have some real life understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. Another input is process performance. I'm going to speak about that a little bit later on, but we'll have to determine whether or not the process is performing as per the established target, and the responsible managers are required to report on this performance. But I'll look at this later on in some detail, because this deserves some sort of more deliberate examination, because there's much of a misunderstanding where this is concerned. Another input would be audit results, and audit results can be your internal audit, your external audits, and a lot of persons leave out supplier audits or even their compliance audits out of the discussion. And I would recommend that you look at these other types of audits that are being carried out in order to determine whether or not you're complying, whether or not you're improving, and what actions that need to be taken by management. Another input is the status of NCRs or non-conformities or corrective action. We all wanted to give a report on the closed out product progress. Yes, it's important for you to provide that information. But we wanted to discuss more of the critical non-conformities and the financial impact on the business or the impact on the strategic objectives. We're not necessarily going to discuss every single non-conformance that is on the list. We're going to determine what are the most critical non-conformities, and we'll discuss it based on the level of risk. We'll discuss them. We'll understand this financial impact. We'll also discuss the impact on the strategic objectives. And instead of saying, okay, the closeout progress is 60%, if you come and report that the closeout progress is 60%, it's not really giving me much information as a CEO. However, if I come and say that this non-conformance, which is not closed out, is going to impact the company by at a cost of $60,000 if we don't implement the corrective actions, as a CEO, I'm going to stand and pay attention, because now it is impacting on my bottom line. So it is important as quality professionals, for instance, or persons within safety or environmental management system, to basically put some sort of measurement on these non-conformities for CEOs to understand the importance of closing out these non-conformities. Another input would be changes that affect the business. It could be changes in technology, changes in processes, the changes in strategic objectives. There could be a new legislation. This aspect of this input is actually related to risk. For instance, it's linked to external and internal context, or external and internal risk. For instance, if there were layoffs in the company, what is the impact on the business, the productivity of the business, on the strategic objectives? If I have acquired a new equipment, is it going to make me more efficient? Is it going to make me more inclined to achieve my strategic objectives? So this aspect is normally under discussed, however, is considered a critical part of the business, because sometimes there are economic shocks, for instance, or external shocks that may affect the business. So while we're in Cloud 9 thinking that we're going to achieve these strategic objectives, there are some changes that are happening that is going to severely impact us being able to accomplish these strategic objectives. In a typical standard, for instance, ISO 9001, they will discuss inputs and outputs. So what you find in a typical management review minutes, for instance, the inputs are first discussed, and then afterwards there's the discussion of the outputs. Why not connect the two? For instance, like this. The input is process performance. For instance, the discussion is about maintenance and making the plant available 95% of the time. 95% is a target, however, the actual is 88%. So that is the discussion that is ensuing within the management review. You now discuss what are the improvement actions, for instance, scheduling maintenance for critical equipment, but my resource needs will be acquiring a software or training or getting certification for my maintenance personnel. So it is not a matter of let us discuss the inputs first and then afterwards we'll discuss the outputs. It's a very fluid type of discussion where I discuss the inputs, which is like process performance, whether we are achieving the objectives, for instance, what are the actions and what are the corresponding resource needs for that particular area. I said earlier on that we're going to be discussing process performance. Let us look at process performance and the bottom line. If we're going to be discussing the input process performance, for example, maintenance, and one measurement of maintenance is plant availability, for instance, which should be 95%. We are now reporting in the management review that is actually 88%. However, the discussion is more pointed when we say for every 1% below target, the cost is equivalent to US $100,000. Isn't the discussion more real or more impactful when we're discussing it like this? Then we're going to say our improvement actions would be implementing the preventive maintenance program. My resource needs are a COG software or training of my maintenance personnel. This is a more real and impactful discussion, and this is the type of discussion I expect to see in a typical management review. Let us look at another example. For instance, production. One of my targets would be to reduce the number of defects, and the target is that it should be less than 3%. We know that for every percent above the target, the cost is equivalent to $3 million. The improvement actions that I'm going to put in place is I'm going to improve my supplier evaluation program, and then I discuss what the resource needs would be. When I'm able to see this, or as a CEO, when I see this sort of quantification, it is more than likely that I'm going to support the quality program, because we are now, as a quality management system, we are now able to quantify and measure all of these areas in order to have a very deliberate and impactful action. I want you to understand, though, that for process in the standard we talk about process approach. This is one element, or when we talk about process approach, when we discuss all the processes and how their performance and how they interlink with each other, that is how we'll be able to determine whether or not we'll be achieving our overall strategic objective. And you know that the new standard is all about performance. It's a performance-based standard. But let us look at reduction of our expenditure. Earlier on I was talking about reducing our internal failures in order to reduce our expenditure. The blanket strategic objective is reduction of failure, reduction of expenditure. But let us see, based on the balance sheet, where I'm able to reduce these internal failures. Things such as rework or waste or failure analysis would be considered internal failure cost. Let us look at external failure cost. Look at the number of returns, for instance. The number of returns is an external failure cost. So our repairs would be well done at the point at the premises of the customer would be external failure cost. Now, when we're able to quantify these costs, and you can show these costs as it relates to the financial statement, this is when the CEO or management is going to stop and take notice about these hidden quality costs, these hidden failures in the system, and now we'll be able to have a more fulsome discussion. But let us talk about the elephant in the room, really, where CEOs is really about the language of money. So if you want to catch senior management attention, we have to discuss the language of money. If we're able to reduce that failure cost, clearly we'll be more of an optimal performing organization. And the way we reduce failure costs is by increasing our prevention cost. Prevention includes things like supplier evaluation, training, appraisal would be your auditing or your testing or your inspection. When we are able to increase those activities, it's more than likely that our failure cost is going to decline. Let us turn our attention to the evaluation of satisfaction of interested parties. Earlier on, we had discussed satisfying the customer. In the new standard, there's more of a reference to interested parties, and we want to make sure that they are satisfied for the sustainability of our business. If we satisfy our customers, clearly we are going to continue our business, but there are other interested parties that we also need to satisfy. For instance, we need to satisfy our internal customers. If we satisfy our internal customers, we're going to have increased productivity or increase employee retention or reduction in our attrition rate. If we satisfy our shareholders, it will be due to increase in our profit margin because we have reduced our expenditure, reduced our failure rates. And also, we would have ensured that we have our regulators' confidence because we're always complying with the standard or the legislation. So it is not just about evaluating the satisfaction of customers or just looking at what our customers think about us. There are other interested parties that we need to take into consideration, because if we don't have satisfied internal customers, it's more than likely we won't have satisfied external customers as well. Now, who owns the management review? Most times it's all about the QMS persons running around trying to ensure that there's a management review. But leadership has to take the role in making sure that we are conducting management reviews. The CEO is responsible for the management review. If you find that the CEO is not taking ownership of the management review, train him, let him understand the impact. But you would be saying that this is the role of management. Why should I be providing training to leadership about something that he should know? The thing is, sometimes they don't know, and sometimes they don't know that they don't know. So it's for you to educate them on how to go about, educating them how they are supposed to conduct their performance review. Management's role is about reporting on their areas of responsibility and how their process is performing, the risks that they are responsible for, how they are managing those risks, any improvement actions that need to be taken. That is a role of senior management. So you have the CEO, and also you have the other managers who are part of the management review process. But there's always a QMS personnel. Even though there's no requirement for a management rep in the organization, I'm sure that the QA people will still be taking a very integral role in ensuring that this is done. And I put the onus though on QMS personnel to try to translate technical information to apply to the business case to see how quality impacts the business. So if you're unable to translate this, it's more than likely that you're going to find that senior management not taking on to owning the management review. You are also responsible for maintaining the records. Maybe you are not the person taking minutes, for instance, but you should ensure that at least there's some maintenance of the records. And you should also be able to provide training to the relevant parties about the importance of management review or what is required for a management review. Management reports on different elements within the management review. But one of the things I find with reporting in the management review, it is not as impactful as it could be. Instead of saying 60% closeout of NCRs, you can report the cost of failures is equivalent to $60,000. That's a different type of reporting. It's more likely for me to pay attention when you are able to quantify these non-conformities. Or you can say, based on the risk treatment options that we have put in place, we have managed to reduce expenditure by $60,000. When we're able to do that, people understand or they will understand the value of having a quality management system. But there are some misconceptions about management review. People think that it should only be held once per year. A management review can be in the form of management meetings or a quarter review. It can be in the form of technical meetings. However, if this is how you're going to execute your management review, make reference to these aspects in the procedure. Don't just say, okay, it's just one review that you may do. You're always doing reviews. So it's good to make reference to these other reviews that you may do within the organization. The key point is that it's review of the performance. People think that management review should be a meeting. No, just think of a small business owner with one manager, the head cook and bottle washer. Clearly that business owner is not going to have a meeting with himself or herself, in my case. But it's important that that small business owner conducts that review. So it does not have to be a meeting. It is just more likely to be a meeting because you have many persons conducting that review. One other misconception is that it should be held only to meet the standard. So what normally happens when the certification body auditor is going to be visiting, okay, I say, all right, since I have to meet this requirement, I will hold my meeting 1 month before the auditor comes. Believe me, the auditor can see right through you and understand that the meeting is not for the improvement or for the sustainability of the business. They know that it's just to meet the standard. But you have to make sure that the management review process is for the sustainability of the business. Now, if you implement all these requirements, or if you are already doing so, I think you deserve a round of applause. However, I want you to make sure that you look at your process again. Ensure that it is effective. Don't just conduct a management review just for the sake of conducting that review. It is an element of performance reviews, and it should be done to make sure that it's for the sustainability of the business. Any questions?
Thank you, Sheryl. Now, with the time left, we will go ahead with questions. Therefore, if you have any questions, it is time to ask them. Please use the comment box or the raise hand function. Thank you. Sheryl, the first question is, I have had the CEO postpone management review several times, and it has affected our external audit schedule. We schedule for quarterly but end up once or twice a year because of the unavailability of the CEO. What can one do?
I think it is important for you to train that management review. I can give you my personal experience when I was going through the accreditation process. I had a CEO who would, he didn't think that management review was an important part of the process. So what I did, I structured a training session for him, half an hour training session for him on the requirements of the standard, on the importance of management review, and this was done for about 3 or 4 months. And after that, what he found out was that this was an important process. His mindset started to change. Second thing too is making sure that he understands the impact of the management review. Sometimes as quality professionals, we don't translate the quality or the system into real tangible terms. So if they speak the language of money. So unless you're able to translate it in that sort of format, they won't take ownership of that process. So speak, just as how if you go to France and you need to order coffee, you speak French. It's the same thing with a CEO. Speak the language of money whenever you're trying to convince him about management reviews.
Thank you. The next question is a company without a QMS personal certification performed before can be accepted for a QMS management review?
Repeat that?
Is a company without a QMS personal certification performed before, can it be accepted for a QMS management review?
I'm trying to understand what that question is saying. If you did that sort of review before, if you did not have a QMS, can that now be accepted as a management review? Is that it?
I believe so. I haven't had any other response.
Well, I guess the short answer is yes, because even if you don't have your system is not, you're not using a standard to guide your system. Really, it's about the business. And if you don't have a QMS, you're still evaluating the performance of your business. It is still a tool. You can still use it as a guide for management review.
Thank you, Sheryl. The next question is, in your extensive experience, which changes can affect the business the most?
Wow. From an external point of view, it depends really based on the organization. I cannot say this particular external factor. For instance, there are many external factors. It could be credit, it could be market, it could be political, it could be environmental. I cannot say off the bat which one is the most impactful, but based on trends, people look at the economy, and that would be the external factor that affects the business the most, because clearly I have to look at the economy to see whether or not I'm able to sell my product, or it's going to affect how my customers think about my product, whether it is too expensive or it's not offering me value for money. So there are myriad of factors that can affect the company, but I'm going to go ahead and say economic issues or economic factors.
Thank you. The last question for the session is, the most common pitfalls occurring in a management review, which ones have you encountered?
Oh, it is the most common pitfalls is not the discussion levels are not impactful enough. There is not much value from the discussion. For instance, process performance. There's hardly a lot of discussion around process performance or even the impact of nonconformity on the business itself. So in essence, most times I don't get a lot of value from the management review. Means it is not meeting the requirement of actually conducting a proper review, performance review of the company. So I don't think the depth of the management review is as how it should be. So that is one of the biggest pitfalls of management review.
Thank you, Cheryl. We will have to conclude this presentation. However, if you have any other questions, you can send your questions through email and we will answer to them individually. Thank you again, Cheryl, for this clear and informative presentation. I want to thank all the attendees as well for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us today. We hope you enjoyed the webinar. To keep up with our webinars, please check PECB's webinar schedule in our website, www.pecb.com, or our official social media network. Since next week, we are organizing webinars on interesting topics. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Artem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.